In the last video, we talked about why we should test. We talked about how dealing with uncertainty, putting the most important things first, helps decrease my risk, helps increase the value of my firm. And we said, hey, at the heart of entrepreneurship is this process of testing and learning and experimentation. And really, as an entrepreneur, I want to learn as effectively and as efficiently as possible. So let's talk about how we go about doing that. Well, the first thing we have to do is identify the assumptions that are built into my theory. I've got to figure out what are the most important things that I need to learn. I'm going to prioritize these assumptions. I'm going to design some sort of test or some sort of way to learn whether or not my assumption is reasonable. Then I'm going to analyze this and move forward. So, let's identify our assumptions. And the key question here is, what has to be true in order for my theory to work? If I assume that my customers have this problem, what has to be true for my theory to work? Well, I have to be right about the problem. I have to be right about the existing alternatives. I have to be right about the solution, that it's actually going to work, that the customer segment really is going to value the solution. So I want to start to list out all the assumptions built in to the problem, to the existing alternatives, to the solution, to the customer, so I can start to figure out if these are reasonable. Oops. So let me give you an example. Let's use Airbnb, because I think they're actually a really fascinating case. There's a great interview with one of the founders on the podcast, How I Built This, by Guy Raz. So the problem, as they identified it, it took them a while to kind of flesh out this problem, so I'm compressing the story a bit, but they realized travelers want to get a more authentic experience. They want to go to Rome, but they don't necessarily want to stay in a hotel. It's really cool or interesting to stay in somebody's house and get a more real life experience of what it's like to be in Rome. Travelers want to save money. Travelers want more options. Sometimes, there's only a few hotels available, and options are helpful. There's also this assumption that hosts want to make money. And there's this assumption that this problem affects enough people to be worth solving. This isn't just one or two weirdos who could do this on Craigslist, but there's actually a market for this. What's wrong with these existing alternatives then? What are the limitations? I'm making an assumption that there's limited information, that there's lack of trust, safety concern, payments awkward. These are all these problems with existing alternatives, or at least assumptions I'm making about these problems. Solution, if I think about Airbnb, what has to be true in order for Airbnb to be functional? Well, people have to trust Airbnb as an intermediary. $1 billion in insurance has to be sufficient to convince hosts to allow strangers to stay at their home. That there's going to be enough hosts and travelers to make a functional market, right? There have to be enough apartments in Rome, and there have to be enough people wanting to go to Rome to make this work. There's an assumption about regulatory agencies, that they're not going to stop this. There's an assumption that the website will be easy enough to navigate. What has to be true in order for Airbnb to work? Well, I can't get lost in the website. I have to be able to figure it out. There's assumptions about customers, that customers are willing to stay with strangers. Hosts will be willing to host strangers. They won't hurt each other. They'll enjoy their interaction. So I've got all these assumptions, all these things that had to be true in order for Airbnb to be successful. So now I want to take these assumptions that I've listed out, again, the process being identifying assumptions, prioritizing, designing a test, analyzing, and moving toward. So I've listed out these assumptions. Let me go ahead and prioritize. Let me put them in order of importance. And so I've got these. And this is a great little way to think about this from Garage Group, the Garage Group. There's kind of two axes here. There's I'm not willing to bet my salary, I'm willing to bet my salary. So how confident am I in this assumption? Like, I feel pretty confident that there's a lot of people that want to visit Rome. Maybe not, again, I'm recording this August 7th, 2020, so maybe not right now in the midst of the COVID pandemic, but generally speaking, I would say, yeah, I'm willing to bet my salary that people want to go to Rome. And the other assumption is this still an opportunity or the other axis, is this still an opportunity if I'm proven wrong, or is this a no-go? Is this some sort of deal killer? If people will not stay in strangers' homes, then the entire idea of Airbnb is just a no-go. If that's a really critical assumption. And I'm not sure I'm willing to bet my salary on that yet. I don't know if I've got enough evidence. Well, today I do, but looking backwards, right? So we could start to place some of these assumptions in different places. So, the website will be easy to navigate. You know what? I'm willing to bet my salary that we can develop a website that's easy to navigate. I'm not that worried about it. Is it still an opportunity of proven wrong? Sure, because I just have to fix the website, right? The security on the website will be sufficient. If Airbnb is suddenly getting hacked all the time, then this is a no-go. But I'm willing to bet my salary that we can build security in such a way, or we can hire it out, contract it out, whatever we need to do, in such a way that the security on the website will be sufficient. And I can start to map out these other ones, but maybe the most critical assumption is this idea: people are willing to stay with strangers, hosts are willing to allow strangers to stay with them. When Airbnb was first introduced, a bunch of venture capitalists passed over it because they just thought, no way, you're wrong. There's no way strangers will allow strangers to stay in their homes. And if I'm a traveler, there's no way I'm going to go stay in some rando's house, right? And this whole idea is a no-go if proven wrong. And, we just didn't have a lot of evidence in the beginning that this would work. So, this becomes the top of my list. That I want to start with the stuff in the upper right quadrant. This becomes the most important thing to test in Airbnb's model. Now, it turned out they did exactly that. Again, I won't spoil it all. Listen to how I built this. The interview with Airbnb founder by Guy Raz. You can find it on NPR, National Public Radio. And they ended up gathering a lot of evidence around this particular issue early on in the game. So now I've got to design some sort of test. If this is my I know what assumptions are most critical. The ones I'm least sure about, the ones that are most important for the functioning of my business. Some things to keep in mind as I'm designing this test. I got to think about how fast, how quickly can I conduct this test? How expensive is the test going to be? How much confidence will I have in the results? You're going to have to make trade-offs here. I might be able to go out and talk to 3 people real quick about their opinions about Airbnb. Again, assuming that this is back before Airbnb was ubiquitous. But let's go back to 2008, 2009 and say, it'd be pretty fast and cheap to go talk to 3 people and say, hey, would you stay in a stranger's house? That'd be fast and cheap, so it checks the first 2 boxes. But would I have a lot of confidence in the results? Not really. That wouldn't give me a ton of confidence that I'm right. So there's some trade-offs here between the speed, the cost, and then the confidence, how robust this test actually is. So let's give some testing options. Interviews. Interviews are a simple and straightforward tests that allow you to learn a lot about critical assumptions. Sometimes, my example I just gave, conducting 3 interviews may not give you a lot of confidence, but maybe conducting an interview, let's say your assumption is about some sort of technological solution, conducting 3 interviews with industry experts who know a whole lot about blockchain, and your assumption is, okay, this particular application will be possible. 3 interviews might be exactly what I need. I need to talk to 3 blockchain experts and get their opinions on whether or not this is feasible. Scenario descriptions. If it's Airbnb and somebody's never tried it, maybe I can walk them through. This is what the experience would look like. This is how you would use the service, the product or service. Mock-ups. I could mock up the website itself. I could watch people interact with my product. So I don't have to build the whole product out. Instead, I could create some sort of, PowerPoint, or even you'll watch some videos from Google on how even when Google is designing something for their website or application or anything else, they do it on paper first because it's fast, it's easy, and allows them to watch people interact with it fast. Surveys. I can run surveys. I can run a Wizard of Oz scenario. So let's say I am trying out Airbnb and I don't want to build all the algorithms that are going to govern the marketplace. Instead, I can just match people manually and say, oh, you're going to Rome? I know 3 hosts who live in Rome, and I can manually send you the information, right? So I don't have to build things off. Instead, there's a man or woman behind the curtain making the prototype function, right? Before you've actually built out the technology. You can build a minimum viable product, the most stripped down, bare bones version of your product. You can prototype things. Again, you'll watch a video by Tom Chi from Google talking about how they prototyped Google Glass and how they used coat hangers what did they use? Coat hangers and hairbands and all kinds of things to test out Google Glass long before they ever tried to build out the technology. You can use archival data to validate some of your assumptions. So you've got all these different options that will allow you to gather information. Some of these are cheaper, some of these are more expensive, some take longer. You know, if you're running a full-on experiment like A/B test, you've got to build 2 versions of your product. That may be a little more expensive, but maybe if it's a really critical assumption, it's worthwhile to do. But all these testing options will let you do this. And so again, watch the Tom Chi video. I'll post this on Canvas. There's also this fantastic clip from the founder. The founder is a story about Ray Kroc and McDonald's. And there's this great clip that you're going to watch from the McDonald's brothers, showing the McDonald's brothers designing the kitchen. And they just found a brilliant way. This was, you know, when there was one McDonald's restaurant. They wanted to redesign the kitchen. They came up with a brilliant way to test their assumptions about efficient kitchen design really cheaply and very quickly. But it gave them really good information. So watch those clips and start to think about what are ways that we can identify our assumptions and then test the most critical assumptions. Test cards are another way to just sort of formalize your thinking. And so we believe that, you know, strangers will stay with, or, you know, travelers will stay with strangers, you know, or we believe that whatever your assumption is here, you put it in that first box to verify that, and then you know, map out, okay, here's the exact test we're going to do. Here's what we're going to measure, and we're right if, you know, this is true. The nice thing about the test card, the green side you fill out before you run the test, before you run the experiment. So maybe it's a survey, and you say, okay, we're going to survey college students about XYZ. We are right if, you know, so to verify whatever our assumption is, to verify that, we're going to survey 200 people. We're going to measure, you know, and we list out, you know, the critical survey questions that we think really matter. We are right if, and then we choose a cutoff. We say, 70% of them answer affirmatively. Then I can go back on the back side of this test card is the learning card. Here's what we believed. Here's what we observed. From that, we learned that, and therefore we will. You know, we observed that only 40% answered affirmatively on our survey. From that, we learned that this is not a viable future for our product or service. Therefore, we will pivot, right? And you can start to think about how you might do that. So test cards you can use with any sort of test, but it just sort of helps you formalize the process of thinking through, okay, what is it that we're believing? What is it that, you know, how are we going to run this test? What are we going to measure, and how will we know if we're right? And if you're really disciplined about doing that before you run the test, that'll help kind of set up the process in a really nice way, so that you've got more confidence in the decisions that you're making. So again, one last time, identify the assumptions in your theory, prioritize these assumptions, again, based on how confident you are, would you bet your salary, and how critical these are. Is this a no-go if you're wrong? Design a test, you know, or experiment, or some way that you're going to learn, some sort of observation, and then analyze that data that you collect and move forward. If you have any questions, reach out. I look forward to seeing where your projects are at and the kinds of tests that you're conducting.